Repetition, consistency, dedication, the keys to success.
That's Vikas Arora, mentor on the Microsoft for Startups program and a startup success manager.
Your role as a coach is simple. You're not there to be prescriptive. You're not their teacher. You're there to paint the picture for them to realize that they're already doing this, but they didn't realize that they had the skills and the ability to do more. As someone that's working with a founder, you need to understand their predicament as well.
Not all mentors and coaches are created the same, and Vikas shows his experience to be the best he can be.
There's no clear mold. Self-belief is paramount.
Vikas's insights come from his years of experience, including building a company with his wife.
Failure is the best way for learning, right? Learning never stops.
Listen in to hear his insights and how to make effective decisions.
I've only seen one do that. Actually say, we made a bad decision. Let's stop. Let's kind of, go back to the drawing board.
You've worked with tons of founders over the years, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what capacity you worked with them in?
Wow. My interest in founders started many, many years ago. I did a job at Vodafone. I was a sales, B2B business development manager for West London. And so that covers West London. It's anywhere from, I think from Chiswick, actually not even Chiswick, from Hammersmith all the way to Heathrow, right? And a little bit further. And then up Harrow, etc. So it was great. Lived in the middle of it, lived in Hayes. So I was able to cover that area. And I worked with, small business owners to large enterprise like John Molan, Air Canada as such. But the thing that inspired me was actually going to see small sort of businesses. And my first encounter with a founder was, and for love of me, I can't remember his name. I mentioned that earlier. I'm really bad with names, but was the founder of Impact Coaches. If you remember Impact Coaches, they used to have these little white vans with Impact. They used to do all the school runs, and I met the founder, and he lived in a council flat still in near Kew. And I remember going to his office, and I thought, oh, it looks really good. Really great address. It's West London, near Kew. Take a left there. I'm driving down the road, and I'm actually, suddenly I realized I should have brought wellies with me, because I'm driving into this yard, which is full of mud, and I'm coming out, and my shoes are all muddy, and I meet this guy, and the business has only been set up 4 years. And the first thing I asked him is, why did you start a coaching business? And I was just so taken aback by his journey. That was my first sort of interest in working with founders. And then over the time, continued, and even then within Microsoft, focusing on media and entertainment. I worked with some startup agencies, worked with, again, companies that are setting up media type of engagements. And then, I think then at one point that got the interest in setting up my own business. And so my wife and I set up our own health and wellbeing business, and taking in what I'd already learned, trying to apply that. But then, if I fast forward to 2022, so post-COVID, during COVID, a lot of people went and just set up their own business out of necessity. They lost their job. There was anything they could do. And that's what got me interested, reading about them, the founder in Insight. And then I got a call saying, do you want to coach founders from Jeffrey Consulting? I said, yeah, who are we working with? Oh, it'll be Microsoft. You know Microsoft. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. And that's the journey I've been on for the last 4.5 years.
So obviously 4.5 years and working with Microsoft, and is with the accelerator, the incubator, and all those companies coming through that, right?
Yeah. What
are those traits you're seeing in them to really be able to tell when you meet them quite early? Have they got what it takes?
Yeah, I think there's so many. It's one of the things that, as a coach, because I coach as well. So as a coach, I'm always thinking when I'm working with these founders, what makes their mindset tick? Why? Why is so-and-so doing this? Why is so-and-so doing this? And, oh my God, that's amazing. You then start to observe how they work. You then start to observe, how they operate. And the funny thing is, no founder, there's no clear mold. There's no Barbie doll or Ken doll that, they all fit the same mold. Everyone's different. So for me, being a coach, the things that stood out for me, may be different for someone else, but it was things like, resilience is a big one, perseverance, consistency, commitment. And these are things that really stand out. And then you've got the typical ones like financial acumen, understanding the business. Networking is massive in these people. And, I think that the irony is that, although networking is a massive one and they're great networkers, half of them are introverts. And that surprises me as an introvert that, you're an introvert and you're actually having to go out and network with strangers. That's stepping out of their comfort zone is a big one. It made me even more interested in understanding what they do and how they do it and why they do it. It's a great place. Love it. I love it. And no mindset, no mind is the same. No founder is the same. When I meet these startups, the first thing I say is why? Why are you doing what you're doing? What for? And the funny thing is there's always a personal story.
So looking at the resilience bit first, right? Because I completely agree with resilience is so important. But sometimes founders, when they're listening to that, they think, I'm resilient. And it's almost that sometimes when you have worked with so many founders that you have, people might think they're resilient, but when it comes down to it, compared to other founders or other people, they maybe don't have the same resilience. And we often ask people when we're hiring them, we'll say, what was the hardest thing you've done in your life? When people apply to the incubator, again, same question, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And what people consider hard, I think says a lot about what the resilience is.
Yeah.
How are you trying to gauge, how do you gauge someone's resilience?
It's everyone's story is different. And I think, I say to people that, everyone's trauma is, regardless of how excessive it is traumatic for that person. When you think about things like resilience, the definition of resilience for one person will be different to another. For one, it could be that, I started this business while having young family and balancing the young family and making sure that I give them time and create a foundation for them while starting my business. That made me resilient. For others, it may be that I started my business during COVID. No one wanted to speak to me. No one wanted to buy anything. Everyone was stuck at home. No one wanted to, but even then I made it a success. That made me resilient. So I think it's I think the importance of knowing resilience, it's going to be different for everyone. There is no cookie cutter approach to it. As long as they know from a resilience standpoint, the key things are that no matter what is thrown at you, that you have the strength to overcome it or steer your journey in a different path, either learning through the process or avoiding the process. But even in avoidance, you're learning from that process. And so when you think about a founder's mindset of being resilient, it's what's the market doing? Where's my industry, and how can I and how do I fare in that industry? Where are my customers? Who are my customers? What do I need to do to serve my customers? And can I change my business? Do I have the strength, the capacity, the financial backing to actually make that change? And at the same time, am I enjoying myself? The crazy thing with resilience is if you're not enjoying the rush, why do it?
It comes back to what you said about personal story as well, right? You said that so many of the founders you meet, they've got a personal story and that could keep them going maybe. Otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen founders maybe haven't got a personal story and still managed to succeed? How crucial do you think it is that you have to really have a problem that you're solving that you've experienced yourself?
I think personal story is great because it, like you said, it's the impetus behind why you did something. But then for others, they've seen a niche, they've seen something that, they're doing that, but I could do it differently. I could do it better because of this. So at that point, there is no personal story. There's a gap that they've exploited, thinking I could do this. I have the skills to do it. So there are founders that have done that have seen an opportunity. The opportunistic founder that has seen something that they'll go after. A great example is, for example, think about patient records at the NHS. If you've ever gone to a hospital, they'll always say, "Oh, we haven't got your file yet." And you think, "Oh, hold on a minute. You're the National Health Service. You should all be on one single system," which they're not. So my GP records should come to you. Why should I have to wait 3 days? And so someone has seen that, right? Now, my wife's been in and out of hospital. My father, my mother-in-law, my father have been in and out of hospital. I never saw that. But I worked with someone that did see that. and thought that, if we could actually digitize patient records, and we can then make that available to everyone via an app. So a surgeon can just literally go, oh, okay, there it is. Yeah. Oh, Mr. Parmar. Okay. Yeah, I see this. Yeah, great. What are you doing here? You were treated yesterday. What am I doing here? It's kind of, that's what you need. And so someone's seen that because they've gone through the pain, but they've had the foresight to realize that I can actually do something about it. And there are those kind of stories, and they're great stories as well, because, the impetus there, the energy is there, is that excitement that I can do this. And that helps. So it's passion. So the other one is passion as well. Passion is massive. If you're not passionate about what you're doing as a founder, don't do it.
Another thing, we're working as a coach, right? There's going to be some skills which people maybe don't always start off with, but they're able to grow and they're able to get that over time.
Yeah.
What are those ones that you think you see many founders need to work on? And it is something that they can work on, right? It's not that they're born with it or they have to. For example, passion is hard. You can't teach passion, right? You've got to really care about it.
Yeah.
But what are some of the skills that people can train?
So the key thing within how you coach yourself and how you train yourself, when you think about the founders that you've worked with over time, the ones that have actually made mistakes and continue to grow, that perseverance piece, that is something that people can coach themselves on and train on, because it's about, first of all, you need to have the desire and the passion to follow, because if you don't have the desire and passion, perseverance is at the door, because you won't have that buzz, you won't have that kind of, that fire in you to actually do something. The second thing that people have grown into when starting up and realize that actually this is something that I didn't have before is the ability to actually learn from their mistakes. As a founder, you are going to make mistakes, and you're not taught on how to overcome them, because, they happen in the trenches. So, the phrase of we're building the plane while we fly it, that's the founder's mantra. Because you think about, someone that may have started a startup, say 3-4 years ago, didn't really invest in AI, they've got no choice now. So that's, if they didn't start early enough, they've got to start now. So you've got to learn that aspect of learning and evolving and repackaging and repurposing what you're doing is something that doesn't come naturally. And you can't pick that up. It just happens, and you've got to change. You've got to go with it.
And we talked about perseverance, right? And we also, the challenge to that is also knowing when to quit. And it's almost two different skill sets, right? One is like you've got to keep going even when it seems like you should quit.
Yeah.
But then you've also got to know when is something not working and to let go. And how do you help people through that? You can look at what they're doing and say, okay, you're doing too much. It's clear that some of these things aren't working.
Yeah.
But they refuse to let go.
Yeah, there's one of the things I think that happens with a few founders that I've worked with is the ego piece tends to kick in, right? So there's that, you've put so much of yourself into what you're doing. It becomes your child, it becomes your baby, right? So you don't want anyone else to be involved in their growth, or you don't want anyone else to nurture them. But I think there comes a time where you have to. I mean, you yourself, when you started BAE, right, there's only a few, and you and Gobi, right? And now you're a bigger team. But there was a time that you had to let go of a little bit. Otherwise, if you hadn't done, you'd have had to shut it down. Think, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it on my own. I don't want to do it. I don't want to give it to anyone else. But on the flip side, there are those scenarios where founders do have to say, enough's enough. This ain't going anywhere. And actually, that is a very, very strong quality in being able to know when to stop. And I've only seen in the 4 years that I've been working with founders, I've only seen one do that. Actually say, we made a bad decision. Let's stop. Let's kind of, go back to the drawing board and let's see where we went wrong. And again, that comes back to learning from the mistake. So they knew they made a mistake. And they took a conscious and say, it's hard. And it is I think the difficulty for a founder in taking such action comes down to if they're emotionally tied into their business and they're emotionally tied into the people that they're working with. And I'm not saying be, complete ruthless leader, but sometimes, leaders do have to take a stance and say, this isn't going anywhere. We need to stop this. It's not going to make us money. I can't pay bills. I can't pay wages. So let's call it quits. And that's a hard decision to take, but you do have to take them from time to time as a leader, as a founder. You do have to look at yourself and know that you've messed up, and be open and honest about it. And honesty is a great thing. Sort of quality in a founder is actually being upfront and honest and saying, we messed up, let's call it quits.
Hello. Quick interruption to let you know a bit more about Bay HQ. We're the community for high growth Asian heritage entrepreneurs, operators, and investors in the UK. You can join us totally free at thebayhq.com/join. There you'll get our CEO structure in your inbox every week, which is content, events, and opportunities. You can also get access to our free Startup Fundamentals course by joining. Let's get back to the show. And when you think about a blind spot, so sometimes founders know what they're not good at, but other times they think they're really good at something and they're not. How do you broach that? Because obviously you're coming from an external perspective and you're having something like, actually, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, you're not as good at, like, for example, with sales, right? It's like, they might think, oh, I'm such a great salesperson. It's like, you're really not, like, objectively. How do you broach that if you're trying to give, and think about it from a perspective, like, if somebody's got a co-founder, they're trying to give them that feedback, but they also don't want to damage that relationship.
It's a difficult one to approach. And I think that the problem happens there is that, especially where where you have a co-founder and they're almost like your mate, they're a good friend, and you have this kind of outside of work, you have a different relationship with them. But that's when it becomes harder to actually say, do you know what, you messed up. You're not really good at that, but you've got to have the ability to kind of be constructive about it and say, like, I've had situations with some founders where I've said, no, like literally, what do you mean? Like, just no, capital N, capital O. That's it. Stop. Can't do it. And it is in terms of, hiring someone. Like, I've had a similar situation where one founder said to me, I want to hire this person. And I know that person. And I've said, no, don't do it. And they're like, no, but I need someone. No, don't do it. I know what that person's like. And, and I've actually had to say that probably within 3 months, you'll get rid of them. So it's no fairness to you because you've invested in them. And it's not even fair to the guy that you're recruiting, even though he doesn't have the right personality for your business. And I've had to say that. And sometimes you've got to, I think I'm in an enviable position as a kind of success manager and business mentor and startup mentor to say that I can say that, because I'm not in any way financially connected to them. I'm kind of like that non-business advisory person that I can say, you're messing up. Don't do it. Seriously. Or I can say, I'm not going to support you anymore. Because you're making that decision. But I think startups need that. Founders need that. They need that external voice. I think having a mentor, what you're providing is phenomenal, because having a mentor, I think for any founder, any startup, is important, because it's an external voice that can be unbiased. They're not financially connected. They have no, commercial ties with you as an organization. You're actually buying into their expertise, and your trade-off is your time and their time, and that's it. And so that relationship is fragile, but it doesn't matter, because you can say, I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
Right. But ultimately, I think where we've had situations where we've had to say to people, where I've had to say to people, don't want to work with you anymore. We're trying to support you, we're trying to help you, we're trying to encourage you and coach you, but we're not seeing you actually deliver, so we're not going to work with you anymore.
If founders listening right now, right, they're thinking, okay, because it's almost a funny thing, right? Nobody thinks of themselves as uncoachable. Everybody thinks, oh no, I listen, I pay attention, right? But obviously not everybody does. So how can you think about that from a founder perspective of, okay, so I want to get advice and I want to grow. How can you keep yourself in check when maybe you are being too defensive, or maybe you aren't really listening properly, or dismissing people when you shouldn't be? How do you encourage that mindset of that openness? How do you train people to be better at that?
So I think if you are going down the journey of having a coach or having a mentor, having the first meeting that you have with that person, you need to agree mutually that this is how we're going to engage. And that, I will from time to time as a mentor or coach call you up upon what you're doing and how you're doing it. As a coach, your role is really not to your role as a coach is simple. You're not there to be prescriptive. You're not their teacher. You're there to paint the picture for them to realize that they're already doing this, but they didn't realize that they had the skills and the ability to do more. And so, that line between a coach and mentor is very different. As a mentor, it's the kind of Miyagi kind of mentality, right? It's like, my expertise, my guidance, I'm passing it on to you. And hopefully you can take some of that and utilize that and add value. There is a kind of an overlap between the two areas. But as a coach, you're meant to kind of, show them the door. And, it's a blank wall and suddenly you make the door visible. Whereas a mentor, you're going to go just open the door a little bit for them. And then they need to take the rest of the journey. But there are going to be situations where the person that you're coaching or the person that you're the mentee or the coachee, they do switch off. They will switch off. And, I always say, you may have heard this before. It's a great caveat to say, you may have heard this before. But the beauty in repetition is that you may have heard it before, but you never heard it the way I'm saying it or someone else is saying it. My mentor and coach is late and great Bob Proctor. And he used to say that repetition, consistency, dedication, the keys to success. And he made great success out of one book, Think and Grow Rich. His whole business was off that one book. And how many of us have read it and not created a global coaching consultancy off it, right? But his art was repetition. So I think that, if someone feels like they've already heard it before, there's no harm in hearing it again, because it reinforces the statement, it reinforces the subject, reinforces the learning. But also that person, your coach or your mentor, maybe saying it differently, that they've never heard it before, and that might resonate with you. So I think, as a mentee and as a coachee, if you have someone that's guiding you, my guidance is to them is to be open, but also to the coach and the mentor is to also be open to understand that person may have already heard that before. So it's a two-way relationship.
I always think that too about something like asymmetry of information, right? Is that if you think that the advice isn't very good, then you've got to give more context. But I don't know if I told you about this before, but these are some of the things we're working on.
Yeah.
And then it makes more sense. Because I remember right at the beginning of Bay HQ, someone was like, oh, most podcasts don't get past 10 episodes. Like, I've already done 200, so I'll be fine on that side. But they've said that, and it's always that context piece, right? It's like the more context you get, the better the advice or better the doors you can show is. But at the same time, if you don't give the context, then you can't be frustrated if the advice doesn't match your situation.
Yeah.
So is that two-way relationship, right? When you're working
there is a two-way relationship. It's important. I think, there are people that can get very prescriptive when they're giving guidance, and it's almost like, do as I say, but never do as I do. And I think that the problem there is that you're not, as someone that's working with a founder, you need to understand their predicament as well, right? So, and you need to understand where they are and what their journey is. You know yourself that, for a founder, the key thing is if they bootstrap their company, that's money that they've dipped into their own pocket, their own savings, they sold their stock, or they've begged, stealed, and borrowed, or they've gone, taken a loan, family loan or whatever. So they're dependent upon giving that money back at some point, right? They bootstrap the business. The next thing they've got to go VC. And if they've never ever done that, if they've never ever put pitch deck together, if they've never had a conversation with a VC, then they're going to struggle. So, as a mentor and a coach, understanding that and giving them insight into that this is going to happen, whether you thought about it or not. There will come a time that you will need investment and you have to go out there and get that. The earlier that they're made aware of that, not necessarily from a fear standpoint, but in terms of this is your strategy, this is your journey, it's important to coach them on that and give them guidance on how to do that. And then, you've got such a great ecosystem where from a network standpoint that, those individuals can come to you and say, we need this help. Can you help us? But I think that, the understanding, having that two-way understanding is really important. And one of the things that I found with working with founders is that they know where they're going. They have their mission. They're very kind of like, they don't care about the other lane. Staying in my lane. I'm going to put guardrails up on my lane. Like when you first go bowling, you put those guardrails up, right? So you bounce off. That's what they're going to do. And you're coming in from the other side trying to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And they're like, leave me alone. But you have to consistently come in. You have to keep chipping away until you get an open door and they do hear you. And at that point, you've got to be ready. You have to be alert. You have to be there to support them. No journey is the same. No path is the same. Everyone's different.
And then just before we move on to quick fire questions, is there anything about the founder mindset that we haven't covered that you think is really important to make sure we get in?
From my experience, it's pretty much the ones I see, and it constantly changes. But I think that, as a founder, if you're, passion is important. Definitely. You've got to be passionate about what you do. You've got to love what you do. Because ultimately, as a founder, what you're creating is there to benefit someone. So you're in service of someone else. So number one's passion. Number two, definitely, having that resilience, that perseverance, financial acumen, understand what you're doing, understand that, this costs money. And if you have a team, I have to pay them. So knowing that you've got, you have that, if you don't, get a good accountant. Then you've got things like networking. The only way you are going to grow your business is by networking. And if you say you don't sell, I'm sorry, you do. Because networking is the art of selling yourself. And so, you put on fabulous events for networking, but then also look at the people you network with, look outside of that. Think about other networking events that you can go to. Networking is important. Understand your industry. And one of the things that I find out that some founders don't do is they just go, again, very much, they've got their kind of like blinders on, but they forget about the market. They forget about the industry. Oh no, COVID happened. Right? So, they completely forget and, understand what's happening in the market. How does that impact you? Understand your competitors. And even if it is a competitive landscape and you want to do it, don't let that stop you. Because, again, my mentor, Bob Proctor, says to me, like, when I want to become a coach, I said, but there's so many out there. He took me out onto the street. He said, what do you see? I said, a car. I said, that's a blue one. That's a red one. Oh, that's a Mercedes. Oh, that's a Ford. Oh, that's a Jaguar. He said, they all have four wheels. They all have an engine. They all have a steering wheel, but they're all different. So, and that's what he said to me. And I understood. So, competition is there, but doesn't stop you from doing what you want to do. You could be the Lamborghini of that area, or you could be the Skoda of that area because you want it to be a very cost-effective service. So don't stop yourself from following your dream and your passion because someone else is doing it. Just means that you have an opportunity to do it better and do it differently. So, but know who they are. Your competition, we talk about the resilience, networking, perseverance, passion, financial acumen. And then also I think that, self-belief is paramount. You've got to believe that you can do it because, you wouldn't have given up that corporate job. You wouldn't have got all that money together to start it. Self-belief. I see that a lot in founders. They truly do believe, not to the extent that you're blind to what else is going on, or you're, you really, you have no idea that your business is failing, but self-belief in the sense in your own abilities and skills. And all of that encompassed into, you're going to fail. Be prepared for failure. That's a paramount one. Yeah, you are going to fail. And anyone that's listening, if you're a founder, you're going to fail. But do you know what? Go out and celebrate that failure. Why? Because you've just found out a way in which not to do it wrong. And, you've just realized something I need to learn. Failure is the best way for learning. I actually say that I'm about to do a podcast on my best friend and giving the game away here. And my best friend is failure because, without that, you're not going to learn. Every mistake you make is the ability to actually grow from. One of my dear friends is ex-British Olympian Colin Jackson. And he talked about marginal gains. Like, for him as when he was running the 100 meter hurdles, a 0.3 second extension in his time and his speed gives the difference between losing, not even getting a bronze and getting a gold. That's the marginal gain. So that meant that, okay, if I could just leap earlier, then I can get over the hurdle. But then leaping too early means my foot could clip the hurdle and I could fall. And he goes, that has happened every time. But I've learned every second, every moment, every time I've done that, I've learned. And every failure has helped me to gain, which then got me the world record. You know, he held the world record for what, 2 years, two tournaments. And if you watch any YouTube video on Usain Bolt, Virat Kohli, they all talk about the comebacks from failure. And that's the same in entrepreneurship and business. You know, the ability to learn from your failure is paramount. And also then finally learning. You know, we come out of university, we come out of school, and think, that's it, I don't need to pick up a book anymore. All right? Mm-hmm. Learning never stops.
So thanks so much for everything you shared today.
Thank you.
Quick fire question time.
Go for it.
So
this is what scares me the most.
So who are 3 British Asians or Asians in Britain you think are doing incredible work and you'd love to shout them out?
So Zam, everyone knows Zamia Desai from Professional Asian and Recommendation. I met her when she was first starting out, and now look at what she's done. You know, from a simple thing like, someone help me, I need to tie a sari, to look where it's got to. And she's creating a community of a platform for other business leaders in the Asian society, in the community in the UK. And I think so Zamia Desai. We spoke about our dear friend Kalpesh Patel, KP, what he's done. He's such a humble person, you know, and there's no ego in him. And he's created a great network again for founders to come together, and the opportunity he's created for them to interact with people like with Jimmy Choo, and I think with Kate Spade, etc. Phenomenal person. And then a big shout out to, I don't know if you know Raj Kotecha, my friends, your friends. Mm-hmm. So again, from humble sort of upbringing in Salford to where he is, working with people like Gary Vee and Tony Robbins and Steve Bartlett. I had the opportunity to actually spend some time with him just literally about a week ago. Actually, yeah, what he's done and what he's doing with Unstoppable Social Proof, I think, is Undeniable Social Proof. Sorry, Raj, is great. And so I think, and with all 3, their desire to actually give back and share without wanting, that is the one value that stood out for me for all 3 of them.
Yeah, know them all, love them all. Then next question is, if people want to find out more about you and what you're up to, where do they go to?
Instagram at Vikas Arora 1 or LinkedIn, but mainly on Instagram. And then my podcast, which is Conscious Conversations. And
if the audience could help you today, what can they do?
I'm a great networker. I love connecting people. So if there's any way in which I can connect the community, please give me a shout.
And again, thanks so much for coming on. Any final words? No,
I mean, I think, first of all, thank you for having me as a guest. And I just want to say that I love what you do. Love your story. And so, keep on doing it.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.